Hey everybody, welcome back to Movie Master, where we rank, review, trailer react, and talk news about movies, TV shows, and video games. Now today, to mark a new year that is beginning, today I thought why not talk about this, my Amazing Spider-Man 1 rewrite, since I've been planning to talk about this for months. I actually did already post a version of this video, but I thought it didn't really match up on par with a different vision I had. Now remember, this is just how I rewrote it. It's just how I wanted the story to play out. This is how I should think the film should have gone had we gotten it. And it basically, the template for this film is the Amazing Spider-Man theatrical cut released into cinemas in 2012, along with ideas from a rewrite from Earthcore Studios that wrote Earthcore Studios or Earthcore Media that did a rewrite on the first Amazing Spider-Man, along with a YouTuber who said how to fix it. Plus, with my own ideas, I kind of like this way I've done it. Now, this is obviously a rewrite of The Amazing Spider-Man 1 for now. I am working on a rewrite for The Amazing Spider-Man 2. So yeah, a few things to expect. The origin story will be kept in, so will Peter Parker's parents, and so will the dark and gloomy tone. So nonetheless, let's get into it. The film would open exactly the same with the Columbia logo. Then after that would show the logo of the Amazing Spider-Man. Then cut to the scene where we see Peter and his parents run away and all that. The opening scene would pretty much be the same until we get to the flash forward scene with modern day Peter. Obviously, he'll just walk around and run into a girl that asks him to take a photo of his boyfriend's car. Even though this would be a throwaway character, just make it Liz Allen, a throwaway character from the comics, and practically the rest of the scene would go the same with Peter passing by Gwen, who he would give a glance over and then soon see Flash Thompson bullying someone else by picking on them. He thinks about intervening, but then when the bell goes off, it ends up not happening. So after science and English, he then finds yet again another kid, this time being a kid named Gordon, being bullied by Flash Thompson, being held up by his underwear, being forced to eat food. Peter interrupts and decides to intervene this time, and Flash tells him to take a photo. He says no and tells him to put him down Eugene, and then gets punched in the face by Flash. This heroic part shows the heroics that we would eventually see Spider-Man give. Most of the time, he's a quite isolated person, so after this punch, we see him later on. Because after English and science was indeed a different class, so he sits in there, and then finds Gwen, and then chats to her for a bit, who have a more like friendly-ish vibe, like partners that work from time to time. And then after school, Peter and Gwen chat for a bit. Gwen says that they gotta finish, if they want to finish their project, she's got to come up to where he works, Oscorp, where she'll be working with her mentor. So yeah, he said yes to that, and then that name sounded familiar. We then cut back to Aunt May and Uncle Ben's house, where Aunt May is cooking her pasta, spaghetti, and meatballs, and Peter is wanted, like in the original film. Most of the film will go the same, with Peter Peter going down to the basement, finding his dad's briefcase, him and Uncle Ben chatting. Pretty much that part of the film will go pretty much the same, and then after that, Peter will find the briefcase and look around inside it. He'll find the ID badge that his dad had from Oscorp, his father's glasses, a capsule that had a spider in it, and then a calculator and a bunch of the other items from the bag. Peter will pretty much be curious about it and then take out the contact lenses and put on the glasses. And after this, Uncle Ben will then walk in and have a chat about him and tell that who that really is. After this, Peter would then start searching it up, and when he goes to realize who this actually is, he realizes he needs to pay a visit to Curt Connors. So we then see him when he slides them under the bed. It turns out he broke the glass tube that the spider was in and was able to crawl up into his shoe. And we slowly see a cut to a slow progression of the spider making its way up the leg, but the audience will completely forget about it when we get to the Oscorp shop. We then get introduced to Oscorp, where after getting inside or going up the escalator into Oscorp, the office lady asks Woody, can he help him? And he says, yeah, he's here for Gwen Stacy and Dr. Connors. And then she said, fine to the right, and he meant, Gwen Stacy, stutters and says Gwen Stacy, and then gets given the pass and goes up the escalator and meets up with some of the interns that are there. And he decides to just stand behind the class, being still not noticing, and then realizes where Gwen is, wondering if Gwen's in the crowd, realizing that Gwen is actually Dr. Connors' assistant. Later on, we end up seeing Dr. Connors we end up meeting around with Dr. Connors, and we see a shot of him for a little while arguing with some woman. After that, he would leave his office and then come out and say hello to everybody. And pretty much it would show him talking to them and introducing them stuff and talking to them about cross-species genetics. And then Peter would answer the question, and him and Gwen would have a little bit of back and forth bantering during that scene the same way. Gwen tells him to take care of the project, take care and help her finish their project, and don't touch anything. And whilst he's finishing that, he bumps into Dr. Raja Youth, who drops the paper, and he notices it has the same two circles with lines crossed on them like the one he found in his house. After that, Peter sits down for a bit, and most notably, is still writing, and then soon gets bit on the behind the neck by a spider, and then tells Gwen that his aunt's calling him, so he's gonna head back. And she says, "Sure thing," and then he leaves. And after that, we'll then cut back to Peter on the train, where he's now unconscious. And soon, somebody trying to balance a beer bottle on his head, he'll break the bottle, then leap up into the air, and then he'll pretty much try and accidentally beat up some of the people on the train. And then after that, he'll end up getting off the train and running back to his house. Now, here's the one thing with the scene I want to change. So far, most of the film, I've only made slight changes to the film. The train scene is another slight one where we cut. Every time he landed a hit on somebody, the screen would always cut to black. I don't want that. I don't want to have to keep seeing the screen cut to black. It's freaking annoying. I don't want to have to see that halfway through a movie. So, after this, Peter Parker will then run back home, and pretty much we'll see the same scene where he catches the fly for Aunt May. He runs back upstairs, takes the frozen macaroni and cheese or the meatloaf, gives his broken skateboard to Uncle Ben, and Aunt May will growl him for not eating her meatloaf, which I just found such a nice little scene, a cute scene of them as a couple, because, well, it shows how much of a couple. We do see some more of these scenes. After this, pretty much, we would see Peter then wake up and break his alarm clock like in the original film and destroy his bathroom, which I just found very hilarious of him doing. He squirts the toothpaste on the wall, then breaks the tap when he breaks the cold tap when he tries to turn it, and then breaks the doorknob, and then uses another door. Then he looks like a bit of a crackhead on his couch because, well, his senses are still starting to kick in. So, yeah. After that, he tries to type on the computer and searches up a bit about spider bites and then breaks the keypad. So, yeah. Anywho, continuing on after the film, well, Peter will be seen on his roof looking a bit at the decay algorithm and reading Dr. Connor's book. Uncle Ben would then ask Peter later what he's doing up there, and he says homework and then walks back in. The film pretty much continues on the same, most of it stays the same, and pretty much, yeah, that's mostly what stays the same. And after this, Peter would then go visit Dr. Connors, and they would chat about the decay algorithm, and he would ask about his parents. And Dr. Connors would give him the same answers as in the film. And yes, Connors does indeed have a wife and kids. And after this, then Peter would then take him and Dr. Connors into his study room, and he would show him the decay algorithm. And then Connors would talk about how much Peter is just like Richard Parker, his dad. After this chat, then Peter, after this, would ask him. Connors would like to ask him if he would come around to the lab after school, and he said, yeah, sure. And then after this, he'll cut down to the Midtown High scene, where Peter, obviously, at the school, Flash knocks the paint bucket over a girl who's doing the pan flips or something, and well, Peter then decides to be silly and decides to make fun of him and embarrass him at the school with the basketball and breaking the hoop and all that. After that, he'll have a big talk with Uncle Ben, who Uncle Ben would even talk to Gwen, his crush. After this, Gwen and Peter would then talk for a bit, and then the song Coldplay would start to play. After that, it would show him leaving, and then show him arriving at a dock near New York, near the edge where Queens is. After that, Peter would then be seen with the earphones put in and then playing the music up loud, and then would see Peter moving around and skateboarding. He would see him jump over different things like in the film, then soon see him try to lift up crates. And the more bigger they get, and then soon tries to lift up a forklift. After that, Peter, tries to lift more things, and then we see him jump on many different things. We see him try to leap up and get up to this beam thing. There's a bunch of beams and the little step things you can try and climb on. He tries to climb on the first one, and then falls down. So after that, it would show him skateboarding a bit more. Then he tries again and gets up to one, and then when he gets up to the second, it pulls off and he lands on the floor. After that, I would see Peter run through like an obstacle course, jumping over and under forklifts and around tables and flipping with his parkour. We then see Peter climb up to this thing. Obviously, he would climb up it and then land and flip down backwards and see a spider going downwards. And after that, we'd see a final shot of him skateboarding. And then after that, we'd see him finish the obstacle course and then use the chains to swing around. After that, we'd see shots of Peter lifting even more stuff, and then the shot would come to its new end when Peter lands on the bar on the table with the chain near him and knocking over a bunch of stuff, and then let out a big whoop after letting go of the chain. It would then cut to the Oscorp scene where, well, basically Dr. Connors would introduce Peter to everything and talk about the Ganali device, about how it was a device Richard Parker invented, and that if he wanted, it could cure the city in a minute, in around a minute or two. But what if toxic gas was released? So it instead now sits collecting dust. So after this, Peter would then run into Dr. Otto Octavius, who would tell him all about how he was actually standing CEO, but now Dr. Raja Youth has now taken the place of standing CEO for Norman Osborn. Otto Octavius would then introduce himself as the head of science, and pretty much, yeah, they'd have a little back and forth, and Otto Octavius again mentioned Peter's parents, installing the importance of Peter's parents in this first film. After this, Peter Parker would then help Dr. Connors experiment and try and see if they could get the formula right using the K algorithm and a cross-species formula to try and get the three-legged mouse cured into form. And after many trial and error, they get a success and then inject it into the mouse, Freddy the mouse. After succeeding, they then succeed and they get the mouse's four legs back, his fourth leg, and then after that, Peter is then seen skateboarding back home, and once he skateboards back home, it turns out he forgot to get Aunt May. So Uncle Ben yells at him to get back inside and apologize. Obviously, Peter and Uncle Ben have an argument and he storms off. And Uncle Ben does not say with great power comes great responsibility. At this point in the story for Peter, it doesn't really need to be said. So after this, Peter Parker would then, after that, run off and pretty much he tried to go buy his milk. And he kind of buys chocolate milk, so he walks off. And a side note is that a lot of people don't like the fact that Peter goes between the nice guy and being an a-hole, the Peter in this movie. But I find it realistic and think it matches his character's personality in this film. And the fact he's isolated is pretty much accurate to his personality from the comics. It just delves into a unique bit of his character. Over the course of these films, because had fans given this a chance, over the course of his films, had he gotten more than 2 films and better writing, we would have seen the extended going from him being an isolated person who prefers not to be around people to a palpable, strong, palpable hero who loves being around people and loves to be loved. And yes, this film, for those who have seen Spider-Man No Way Home with the lizard and all that, this film will, if people want to do this film, can indeed tie into the plot lines that film does. But nonetheless, let's just continuing on with that. Nonetheless, after this, Peter would then see Uncle Ben. Well, no, actually, the guy who's after Peter couldn't get his chocolate milk, so after Peter couldn't get his chocolate milk, he'd then walk away. The guy behind him would knock over some stuff near the cashiers. The cashier would get distracted. He then takes some money from the register and then throws Peter's chocolate milk. And then after the guy next to the guy that took the money from the cashier walks off, Peter walks out along with them, and then pretty much the cashier working there tells him for a little help, asks him for a little help. So Peter says not his policy or not his problem. So after that, we'd see Peter walking, and then we'd see Uncle Ben walking and waving out to Peter, who would then walk down an alleyway. Peter would then Uncle Ben would then go to see what it is and realized that somebody's getting assaulted. Peter, who is up in a high area and under a bridge, would be on his phone and then turns it off and uses his senses, and then soon it all stops when he hears a gunshot. After that, Peter would then run and then walk closer and see who it really is. And then by the time he gets there, he realizes it is indeed Uncle Ben on the floor and dying. Peter is then grieving in the alleyway and crying out for somebody to call an ambulance. After that, this would be the original scene, death for Uncle Ben in The Amazing Spider-Man. And I think I like him more. After this, Peter would then be seen at Aunt May's place with cops there, also talking to Aunt May if she knows who the guy who killed Uncle Ben is. She says no, so the guy walks off, but before Peter asks if he can have that, and the guy says that he has a star tattooed on his left hand. So with that, they then leave, and Peter is seen grieving over it and realizing it is his fault. After this, we then see Peter try to listen to a voicemail from his Uncle Ben, but he can't do it. After this, we then cut to Peter grieving a lot, and it would show him at Uncle Ben's funeral with a scene that I think should be added in of Uncle Ben's funeral, and it would show Peter being devastated in the entire thing, and we'd hear him try to listen to Uncle Ben's voicemail. And after this, it would cut to a scene where he doesn't try to listen to it, and it would then cut to him playing it after the funeral, cut to him playing it again, but he couldn't listen to it yet again, and so it would show him walking back in school. And after this, pretty much Flash would try to talk to him, but then he'll grab him and slam him up against the locker. They'll chat for a bit, then Peter would leave. And after that, Peter would then talk with Gwen. Gwen would hug Peter, and then Peter would leave. And we'd then see Peter walking back and seeing Dr. Connors. Him and Dr. Connors had back and forth on about whether or not what Uncle Ben meant and what his legacy was, and that he should build bridges. Colonel Connors said that he should build bridges since Peter mentioned Uncle Ben built bridges. And so Dr. Connors gave a little touching pep talk about how bridges can build stronger things and that he should build his own bridges. Then it would cut to a scene with Peter going back inside, and after that we'd see the pamphlet of the wanted criminal, and after that we would see Peter walking down an alleyway and seeing a woman get yelled at or assaulted by his perspective and getting yelled at by her boyfriend. And so he goes up to try and attack and beat him up, and then a bunch more people from his group come to help come to his rescue. Then Peter runs away after there's too many, parkours over certain things and escapes from nearly all of them. But the guy he's chasing down thinks it's Uncle Ben's killer and nearly drops him off a ledge, but when he realizes it's not the person he wants, he pulls him back up and runs away, but falls through a roof and lands on a wrestling ring. So the guy he saved yells at him so that he's seen his face. After that, Peter gets up and looks at a poster of a wrestling guy with a mask and soon draws it. After drawing this, Peter then starts beating up guys and seeing if it's a guy he wants, and then just leaves him there. And after that, it would cut in between with him training and learning how to do his parkouring in the morning and night, and then show him beating up a bunch of people at night. It would show that he develops his parkouring skills, and after this, Peter would then after that show him beating up another guy, and then hearing the screams of somebody to help him, and then is found out it's at a store, and he's getting robbed by a robber at gunpoint. It's not the guy he wants, so he knocks him out and just leaves him there for the police. After this, we then see him develop web shooters like the ones we see in the actual film, and we see him swing around and have the ability to swing. And so during this, we see him catch even more bad guys, but then he realizes after listening in on two people saying that he needs more aerodynamics, he realizes that when he studies it, he does need more aerodynamics after realizing this. Peter then tries to swing and keeps doing the vigilantism, and realizes that in turn he does actually need spandex, the best material, which is flexible. So he gets red and blue spandex he finds in the school and sews him up a suit, and then darkens it really red and blue, and then sews it up, puts some lining in it and sews it together with a sewing machine. And then after this, Peter would then touch it up and then use some gloves and then touch those up, and then soon create a mask with some glasses. And then after this, he would rebuild his web shooters to make web shooter Mark IIs, and then soon turns them on. And obviously, we would see the first person shot of him with the running through the building, and then soon would see his full-fledged suit. And then after that, he'd be at the top of the building, getting called by Aunt May to tell him to get organic eggs. So after this, we'd then cut to a clip of a guy in a car, a valet parking the car up. A thief would then come along and unlock the car, and soon he would get inside the car with Spider-Man in the back seat, telling him not to do, if he's going to steal a car, don't just like one. After that, he goes back and forth with him, and then he webs the guy in the face. After that, he tries to get out, and so Peter keeps webbing the door back in, or Spider-Man as he's called, keeps webbing the door back in. Then after that, the thief is able to open the window, wind the window down, and get outside. Peter then goes around from the back and slams into him and slams from him and then puts him in a headlock, and then he gets knocked down to the ground. Peter then tries to punch him or something, and then pulls out a gun, and then he nearly shoots him twice, and then he takes the gun away from him and throws it to the side. Takes the gun away from him and then webs him to the side of the car. After that, he webs the other guy to the side of the car. The guy's hand to the other side of the car, and then Peter looks at him and pulls his wrist pulls his sleeve open, and when Peter looks at it, he tilts his head and then shakes it a bit, and then left hooks him right in the face, ripping his hand away from it. And then Peter will start yelling, "Do you know who you killed?" And then he would reference the date that July 7th at about 10 o'clock he killed a man in cold blood. And then after that it would show him keep on beating him, and after that it would show him beating him up again. And then after that, it will cut back to him pulling out a knife, and he'll joke around like a jerk and say, "Is that a knife? Blah blah blah." His weakness is small knives, and so he webs his hand to the wall and keeps on punching him. It reverts between him being a nice guy and an a-hole, and kind of keeps that thing going. After this, Peter keeps beating the guy up and pulls him, and then he pulls his mask off, revealing it to be Peter. And the thief realizes it's the guy he threw the chocolate milk to, and then he realizes that he yells at him for killing his Uncle Ben and keeps wailing down on his face. He then hears the cops going around, and then when he's about to do it, he picks up his knife yet again. Then Peter webs his hand to the wall, webs his other hand, and then keeps flipping him back, and then webs him in the nuts, and then webs him on the mouth. Wanting to kill him, he decides to let him breathe. Realizing this, he puts his mask back on and then talks to the police about how he's not the bad guy. And then after that, he grabs a gun. When the policeman tries to shoot him, he grabs the gun from him and then throws it and then runs away from the police. Obviously, the same police chase scene plays out where he runs away, jumps off a bridge, swings away. And pretty much Captain Stacy tells them that several of New York's finest versus one guy in a unitard, and they lost. And they give him all a look of yes. They all say yes. And then he walks away in disappointment. And then after that, we cut to Peter getting back home to Aunt May's. Aunt May asks him to take off the hoodie. She realizes what the hell is he doing. She asks him what the hell is he doing, and he tells for Aunt May to please go to sleep. Aunt May and Peter then get into an argument, and Aunt May tells her that secrets cause for not keeping. After this, it then cuts to Peter later on the next day at high school, talking with Gwen Stacy. Gwen and Peter would go back and forth a bit, and Gwen actually mentions that she's only had. Peter actually asks if she's had any personal relationships before, and she's mentioned one, that being Harry Osborn. And Peter goes, This would obviously be a reference to Harry Osborn early in the film. I actually forgot to mention this on a side note. In science class, Harry was actually Gwen's first boyfriend, plus also her lab partner. This gives it comic accuracy. And yes, Peter didn't have a crush on Liz Allen, keeping it towards the comics, but he never bothered asking her out. Gwen is now going to be his first official girlfriend in the series, and after they're back and forth, and she gives him the address, and then after that, later on, it would cut to Dr. Curtis Connors and Raja Yelth talking a bit about how the serum should be made, and it needs to be made for Dr. Connors. Connors resists the idea of doing this. Soon after finishing their argument, Otto Octavius walks in, telling them that he's going to shut down the lab for a little bit. He'll be gone, and he'll be in his office. And then after that, Raja Yelth and all that talk back and forth. After Connors denies wanting to do anything about that, and denies having any involvement in the Parker's disappearance, Dr. Raja Yelth fires him and tells him to clear out his office. So, Connors tests the serum on himself, realizing that he wants to be whole, so he tests it on himself, and then it shows him shaking. But right before that, we then cut to Peter landing behind Gwen Stacy's fire escape, and he would knock on the window. Gwen would open the window and ask, ask how'd you get here so fast, and blah blah blah. They'd have back and forth, and then he'd meet Gwen Stacy's father, Captain Stacy. After meeting him, they'll chat a bit about Bronzino's dinner, and chat a bit and get into an argument about Spider-Man. Peter realized the kind of effect he has on the city and people on New York, and then Peter and Gwen would go onto the balcony and talk. Peter would then reveal who he really is, and they would make out. And then after that, well, Peter would then, Gwen's mother would actually interrupt Peter and Gwen kissing, and so Gwen would leave when Peter hears sirens. He then goes to leap off the building and swings over to go to the bridge. We then see the bridge scene where the cars and all that, the lizard attacking, and then we'd see Spider-Man landing right where when the lizard is about to go attack Dr. Raphael. So he gets down into his Spider-Man suit and then fights the lizard on the bridge. He also tries to web the cars that the lizard is launching off the bridge, and after that, he's finally able to catch them, and he also catches Raza Yelth. Raja Yaf does indeed reappear in the film because, well, he leaves the film for some reason and never returns. But continuing after this, Peter will go to get the lizard, go after the lizard, but a father from the distance asks, can he help his son? His son is can somebody help him? His kid is trapped, so he swings over to help his son. It's the same exact scene in the film, and pretty much Peter learns what it is to be Spider-Man, and pretty much Peter swings off and learns what it means to be Spider-Man. So then, we then cut to the morning scene in the we cut to the lizard turning back into Dr. Connors, and we'd see him fascinated about looking into there. And then after that, we'd cut to a morning scene in the bleachers where Gwen and Peter are talking a bit about the spider, which is in the case now, the dead spider. And him and Gwen and Peter talk a bit before they start making out. Peter does not at all throw the ball and dent the goal. It makes too much obvious stuff. And after this, Peter would then go visit Oscorp, and we'd see him talk to Dr. Connors a bit about the lizards and how to capture them. And then after that, Lizard would leave, and then he realizes, and then after going to look at the mouse, who is a lizard, Peter realizes what Dr. Connors has done to himself. So we later see Peter going to Captain Stacy for help, and after Captain Stacy does not believe what he's trying to say, Captain Stacy has him escorted out, and then Peter, seeing the lizards, realizes and sees Dr. Connor walking into a corner. Peter starts following Dr. Connors via the roof and sees him go into a sewer. So Peter follows suit by suiting up. And then we'd see Dr. Connors in his lab talking about how he's increased about the lizard experiment, increased the velocity of the injection to more. So then Peter's seen shooting a little hamper nest for him to rest on while he plays games, and he whipped his camera up somewhere. And so then Peter is then waiting until the lizard attacks. The fight on the sewers is pretty much all the same. After that, the way the lizard finds out he's Spider-Man is not by finding it on the back of his camera. That is the dumbest way a villain to ever find out who Spider-Man is. It would just say property of and then have scratched versions of Peter Parker's name, because he hasn't labeled it in years. And then pretty much Lizard would smash the camera, destroying the camera, unfortunately. And so after this, Peter would then be seen landing back at Gwen Stacy's place after being injured. Him and Gwen would talk a bit, and she would heal his wounds, and Captain Stacy would nearly interrupt him with her saying that she doesn't want any cocoa and all that. After this, Peter and Gwen would talk a bit about Captain Stacy and about how her worrying about her father, and she doesn't want that to happen to Peter. Peter says not to worry, but he has to fix his mess. So after this, he talks to Gwen about getting out of their house and swinging around, and so they do. It would see them on top of the clock. It would see them swinging off and then closing on the clock tower near it, and then it would see them on a date, and then they'd make out again for the something time in the film. After this, it would then cut to the film would pretty much play out the same with the lizard. It would cut back to Midtown High, actually, and we'd see Peter and Gwen walking through school, bantering a bit about it, and we'd run past Flash, who has a little talk off with them, and they act a bit like a trio. After that, we'd then see two girls talking in a bathroom stall. The toilet then starts shaking, so the girls run out, and it turns out the toilet rips down into the ground, and it's the lizard coming out of the bathroom, booming up from out of the ground, out of the bathroom stall, and it terrifies the two girls, but then runs off and roars. Peter, hearing it, realizing it is indeed the lizard, and then he runs out and tries to sniff for Peter. He asks Gwen to go, and then he runs away, going to find his spider suit, going into a bathroom to find his spider suit. He sniffs around and then soon, right as he's about to start attacking some teenagers, Peter interrupts by throwing him his Spider-Man suit, and then they fight throughout the school. Peter Parker would then thram each other, and then pretty much throw each other around like crazy, and then pretty much beat each other up, slam through walls, and then the entire fight in the school will pretty much be the same. The lizard will still make that formula that affects them, blah blah blah. Their fight at the school is pretty much the same. The Stan Lee cameo, everything's merely the same, with the lizard running off. And then near the end of the fight, Peter then finds Lizard on the ground. It's actually Dr. Connors. With Peter's mask now off, Dr. Connors now knows who Spider-Man is because he demasks them. When Connors is terrified a bit of Spider-Man, Spider-Man tells him to calm down and then pulls off his mask, it being Peter. Connors is completely shocked. But then he pulls Connors down and puts him down into the sewers, and then after that, takes him back to his base. Peter then discovers his base and then realizes what's happening. After this, Peter and Peter and Connors then talk a bit, and then after that they go back and forth about what would Peter do if he could keep all the power he feels and all that, and they go back and forth about whether or not it's right to have power, about the power they feel. Peter says he'll fix Connors, and then Connors talks about how Peter's father, Richard, never let him look at any of his notes, and that Connors wants to make a world where everyone is equal, and thanks to Peter, now he can. So he then injects himself with a serum that sees him starting to turn into a lizard, but midway through that, Dr. Rajayath comes in with 2 Oscorp guards and shoots him down. It's thought to be dead, so Peter goes in to attack Yath, and then he sprays him with a sedative, and he tells him it's a sedative, and tells him that about his father and who he really is, and that does he think what happened to his mother and father's disappearance is an accident. This makes him have a questioned face, and then he leaves Peter there, and he asks the 2 guys to come get him. So after this, Peter gets knocked away by the lizard, and then he eats one of the guards' heads off. And one of the guards tells Connors tells him to run up. He tries to shoot at Connors, who then bites his other head off. After this, wake up. An unconscious Peter would indeed wake up to a destroyed lab with Dr. Connors gone and 2 dead Oscorp guards. Peter would then call Gwen and ask if she knows about Oscorp can make an anti-serum, and she said maybe, and then Peter finds notes for an anti-serum that Dr. Connors had and tells her the exact formula, and then she realizes it and soon figures the rest of it out and then goes off. There was indeed the broken monitor showing a bunch of the lizards that he actually wants to turn the whole city into a lizards. That being making everyone equal. After this, Peter would then go to swing off to try and get to Oscorp. He would then mask up and go off. After this, we then see later shots of Captain Stacy of the lizard trying to exit and go towards something. Dr. Connors would then be Captain Stacy would then be told by some of the policemen that where the lizard and Spider-Man are, he wants them both off the streets and to try and find the lizard. Captain Stacy then gets into a helicopter and flies off, and then we cut to Dr. Connors trying to get into the city, and then a SWAT team's ready there to ambush him. When they think they've nearly gunned them down, he knocks them out and just kills some of them. Kills 2 of the policemen and then launches some of the gases, and it actually is poisonous. The gas starts to spread a bit like a wildfire, but luckily it would be contained, so yeah, it's only contained to the police people, but he does end up instead of infecting them with the gas, he does end up injuring them. The gas doesn't actually do anything deadly to them, but he does end up injuring them heavily. He leaves some of his grenades there by accident, which would luckily not triggered. So then it would then cut to, Captain Stacy being heard about the police people, his fellow police coming in from dispatch, telling him about the lizard and the rampage. Gwen Stacy would then get to Oscorp and try to make up a formula for the lizard's anti-serum, and then decides to evacuate there. Peter comes out of a manhole and then tries to tell Gwen that he needs to evacuate. She needs to get out of there now. Gwen says she's going to get everyone out while the anti-serum is getting made and evacuates the building. Whilst this is happening, Peter decides to go swing over to Gwen, and then one of the people says that he's heading south, and they would see a longer first-person shot of him, and a real long, outgrown long first-person shot. And whilst we'd see this, Spider-Man would then be cornered by the police and shot out of the sky with a taser. He'd then land on the taxi and then land on the ground. When he does indeed land on the ground, Peter is now knocked out. So, the SWAT team all goes down on ropes and goes down to corner him and scope the place for buildings. He's handcuffed and put on his setup so that Captain Stacy could demask him. Right then, Peter wakes back up, swipes Captain Stacy off his legs, knocks out all his guards, and right when Captain Stacy's about to corner him, Spider-Man whips his mask back, and then as he's about to, he puts it back on and turns on, and the light turns around him, and he tells him that his daughter is heading to Oscorp. The lizard is heading to Oscorp, and his daughter is there, so he has to let him go. So Captain Stacy lets him go and tells all the police people to hold their fire, but one of them forgets and shoots a shot at Peter's leg. Peter is now injured as we see a bloody hand mark on him, and as he's trying to get there, we then cut back to Gwen evacuating the place, and the lizard has now broken in, wanting to go up to Dr. Rajayath and get the Ganali device. And it turns out Peter is now on his way there trying to get there. Whilst there, he keeps crashing into the window and realizes he's too far. Whilst this is happening, the city is getting half evacuated near Oscorp so that the police can get there, and they're about to storm the building to see what's going on. Soon after this, Peter is then seen trying to swing, and the father of Jack realizes what's going on and soon asks, does his friends have any friends connections, and they're telling them to evacuate the city. So he tells them to get them on the phone right now and get the cranes ready. So when Peter gets up to a building nearby, he then realizes what's going on, and when he tries to swing, he slams onto a building and lands on a car. When a bunch of people who are against him try to beat him up, some of the New Yorkers who like him come to his rescue and tell him to go. So he jumps onto a wall and tries to walk up, and as he does, he gets up to a roof point where Gwen is then terrified of the lizard, where the lizard is walking around while she has the Gennady device in hand. After this, Peter is then on top of the building, realizing that the cranes have all armed up to his position. 4 cranes all in sequence. So when Peter tries to run towards the edge of the roof and leap off and spin a web out of his hand, it misses, and so then he falls. After this, Peter is then caught by a metal beam thanks to a crane. So he then realizes the help he got from it. Then after that, he wins and swings off. And after one swing, swings off another after two swinging off 2 buildings, he swings off another crane thanks to that one's help. And then after that, he luckily swings a few more buildings, and we get the cool dramatic scene of thanks to the help with New York cheering for him to go save the day. And then he swings off a 3rd crane that was helping him, and when the webs run out, he replaces the webs and then keeps swinging. And after that, we keep seeing him swing and swing up until then. And then we'd see him get to the final crane, which is so far away, and it turned out he would swing off there and land on the building, and then flip up to the roof, where the lizard is now broken down the door and grabbed the Gennady device from Gwen. The lizard is now trying to get to has stolen the Gennady device and is taking Raziel hostage. Captain Stacy now knows about it and is heading towards Oscorp, and so the lizard is now up towards near the top of the building, but halfway there, Spider-Man does indeed stop him, but then beats him up and kicks him off and gets to the roof. After kidnapping Raziel and after Gwen makes a cure, Gwen tells Captain Stacy to get it towards him, and then he ends up going up to the building to go give it to Spider-Man. Peter is then fighting the lizard after thwipping and starts fighting. The fight pretty much goes out the same way, but then they do get to the high area and it starts changing a bit. He hides a bit, then comes up from out of nowhere to fight lizard, but after that fails, Peter gets nearly near the edge of the building, so the lizard wraps his tail around Peter, uses one hand to break both his web shooters, and then holds him in one hand and demasks him and tells him about how poor Peter Parker and how he's all alone, that he has no mother, no father, no uncle, and that he's pretty much all alone. And then after that, Captain Stacy interrupts and shoots him, and then gives him the anti-serum, and so Peter then swings up and then distracts the lizard and tells Captain Stacy to go now. And so after that, Peter then leaves the lizard to freeze in the liquid nitrogen. Luckily, he's able to get up in enough time to disable the Gennady device, but the lizard gets up there and holds onto his leg. So he rips off the Gennady device, which is about to launch. He rips it off, and then after that, drops it in the liquid nitrogen. And what happens is the liquid nitrogen actually breaks it down so much, so then he injects half the cure into Dr. Connors, and then after injecting it into him, kicks him off. So the liquid nitrogen actually causes the serum to explode, and since he injected him with the cure, he drops the rest of it into the Gennady device, and it breaks, and it destroys it, and it creates a massive explosion, but then gets contained by the liquid nitrogen. The lizard obviously falls and breaks the antenna off of Oscorp Tower. Same thing pretty much happens. Peter nearly falls off and then gets caught by Dr. Connors, who's now turning back to human. And now his dream of being complete is now no longer happening. After that, Peter then secures Connors and asks him if he's alright, getting him some clothes, and he says yeah. And then they have a little back and forth about how he's apologizing, and that his parents' disappearance, they were no accident. His parents' disappearance were indeed an accident, and that he's sorry, he does know more about it. And then if he's willing to know, Peter ends up cutting him off and saying that he doesn't actually want to know. And then he says he's happy with what he knows, that his parents were 2 great people. Dr. Connors has nodded his head in a happy mood, and we then see Otto Octavius get there to try and defend his case, and that he's decent enough, and then the police come there and arrest him by putting him in a penitentiary. He then gets put in a penitentiary and left there, and after a while getting taken away, Peter then cuts back to Peter back at school with his injuries now more healed, and him and Flash catch up for a bit and go a bit back and forth. And after that, Peter then chats with Gwen, and they start having a little bit of the cute moments again. After that, it would see Peter finally get introduce Gwen to Aunt May, and they would actually finally meet each other and have a little back and forth. Captain Stacy even coming over too. And then soon we'd actually see them all meet each other. Gwen's mom and dad would actually meet Aunt May and see Peter's house, and pretty much they'll get to meet, and it become a bit of an awkward situation. After this, Peter would visit Uncle Ben's grave and thanks them for what they've done for him. And after that, it will cut to him being at Gwen's house, him and Gwen are watching TV. And right at the end, Gwen's Captain Stacy's about to head off and go leave. So he tells Peter that he's looking forward to seeing him later, and he's basically hinting that he's going to see Peter very soon, and Peter's actually confused, asking what that means, and he's saying that he'll see him the next time he visits or at school. After that, he leaves, and then Peter and Gwen looked at each other in a bit of a curious mood. And then after that, we would cut to Peter. Peter would hear a police report, and then kiss Gwen, and then after that, it would show him walking off, and then it would cut to the final swing scene, basically the exact same in the film. And after that, it would then cut to the credits, and after that, we get the post-credit scene of Dr. Kirk Connors talking to Mr. Fierce, or the guy or the man in black. And then after that, I'll cut to the credits. Pretty much, this is how I kind of want to do my Amazing Spider-Man film. Tell me what you guys think in the comments below, and make sure you guys like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Tell me what you guys think of the Amazing Spider-Man 1 rewrite I did. Did you love it or did you hate it? Now, I've tried to do this video many times. I even wrote the script back around September, October last year. So yeah, this is the first video of 2022, January 1st, 2022. I'm uploading this, so tell me what you guys think, and hopefully you guys enjoy it. The next video will indeed be me reviewing Cobra Kai Season 4, which will be the main video for tomorrow on January 2nd. Tell me what you guys think in the comments down below. So yeah, tomorrow will be Cobra Kai Season 4 review and the ranking of all Karate Kid films and Cobra Kai seasons. So yeah, tell me what you guys think in the comments below. And I do have ideas for the Amazing Spider-Man 2. And yes, as you do notice, I have indeed stopped Gwen Stacy's dad from dying. That will indeed be in another film. So yeah, the Amazing Spider-Man 1 rewrite released in 2012. This was my vision for the film, and I do indeed have a vision for the sequel of what that could be like. But nonetheless, guys, hopefully you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll make sure to see you guys all lovely people tomorrow. Happy New Year, guys, and enjoy 2022. Because it's going to be fun. It's going to be a fun new year with so much surprises that I cannot wait to see what's waiting in store for the school year and for my life in this year. So, yeah. See you guys. Bye.